Leo souls, radiant and born to lead, let's get one thing clear right from the start: a spiritual explosion is coming. Not in weeks. Not someday. It begins tomorrow. And no, it's not a coincidence you've landed here today. You were drawn here by something higher, something pulsing beneath the surface of your life. Maybe you've been feeling it too, those restless nights, the repeated signs, the subtle shifts in energy that seem to whisper, "Get ready." This is not your imagination. It's a supernatural signal, and the universe is calling your name. This message is your cosmic wake-up call. A spiritual bomb is about to go off in your life, not to destroy you, but to shatter the illusions that have kept you silent, compliant, or smaller than your soul's true size. Everything that's false, forced, or fake is about to collapse. The pressure that's been building is about to be released, and what rises in its place will be the most unfiltered, empowered, and magnetic version of you that you've ever known. Today's video isn't just a horoscope reading. It's a transmission. A sacred map written in 5 tarot cards that reveal exactly what's breaking apart, what's about to be exposed, and most importantly, what's waiting to be born through you once the dust settles. So if something deep inside of you has been whispering that a turning point is near, this is it. The themes in this reading run deep: truth, exposure, transformation, release, and power. The kind of power that doesn't need approval. The kind that doesn't perform to be loved. The kind that simply exists because it always has. So I invite you to stay with me through this entire video. What you hear might shake you, but it will also free you. You'll understand why certain people are falling away. You'll see why delays happened the way they did. And you'll finally start to feel what it means to be aligned with your own truth, not just someone else's expectations of you. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank you deeply for being here. Every view, every like, every comment and subscription brings you closer into the soul family of eternal mindfulness, where messages like this don't just entertain, they awaken. Your presence is not just seen. It's felt. And it's sacred. If you've ever felt like something's been stirring beneath the surface. If you've been wondering whether the signs were real. If you've questioned whether the time for your breakthrough is finally here. You're in the right place. And this message is meant for you. Now, I invite you to comment below and affirm it with your energy. I am ready to step into my truth and lead my destiny. Say it out loud. Type it out. Declare it. Because when you do, something in the universe shifts. You give permission for the illusions to fall away and for clarity to rise. You step out of waiting and into alignment. And trust me, by the end of this video, Leo, you won't just feel different. You'll be different. Let's begin. There's something quietly sacred about the moment the Strength card appears, especially when it rises as the first messenger for Leo. It's not just poetic coincidence. It's resonance. For a sign ruled by the sun, born with fire in the chest and boldness in the bones, this card is a mirror reflecting not just who you are, but what your soul is ready to remember. True strength is not loud. It doesn't roar to prove a point. It doesn't need to dominate. And it certainly doesn't look like smiling when you're aching inside just to keep the peace. The kind of strength this card speaks of is internal, rooted, steady like a flame that doesn't flicker even when the wind howls. It is the kind of strength that chooses softness in a world that has mistaken it for weakness. The kind that dares to stay open when it would be easier to shut down. For so long now, you've held yourself together for the sake of others, holding space, holding pain, holding back. You've been the one to show up, to carry the weight in silence, to protect the image of being okay, even when something deep inside you longed to be seen. But strength isn't suppression. It isn't about how much you can carry without collapsing. It's about recognizing when to let go of what no longer nourishes your soul and honoring the quiet whisper that says, "This isn't mine to hold anymore." There is a moment in the life of every heart-centered being when the desire to protect others turns into a slow erosion of the self. That moment may be now. And the Strength card does not come to condemn you for that, it comes to awaken something sacred inside of you. It comes to remind you that loving yourself fiercely is not selfish. That allowing your fire to burn is not destructive. That surrendering to your own truth, even when it is inconvenient, is the most courageous thing you can do. This card is a call to meet yourself at the threshold of transformation, not by force, not by anger, but by the profound discipline of compassion. Not just compassion for others, but for your own wounds. For your inner child who learned to be brave before they learned to be safe. For the version of you that believed staying silent was strength. You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You just need to be present. There's a teaching, older than memory, that says true power emerges when we stop resisting the river and begin flowing with it. Like water carving through stone, your soul has the capacity to shift landscapes not through control, but through constancy. And Leo, that's what you're being asked to do now. To stop pushing and start listening. To stop holding and start releasing. You may feel that something is about to break, but what if that breaking is actually a becoming? What if the parts of you that are cracking open are simply the old walls falling away, revealing the light that's been there all along? You are not falling apart. You are falling into alignment. So if your heart has been heavy, if your patience is thin, if your voice is trembling because it's been held back too long, let this card remind you, you are not weak for feeling. You are strong because you still care. You are strong because you dare to keep showing up. And the fire inside you, that's sacred, radiant fire, is not here to destroy. It's here to illuminate. Let it rise. Let it burn. Let it show you what freedom really feels like. And if this speaks to you, take a breath right now and comment below. I am ready to honor my fire and lead with courage. Because when you declare it, you don't just claim your strength, you become it. There are moments in life when truth doesn't arrive softly. It arrives like a sharp gust of wind, lifting the veil in a single breath. That is the essence of what the Seven of Swords represents in this reading. After the quiet, inner awakening of strength, which reminded you that softness is not weakness, this next card shifts the tone. It draws your attention outward, asking you to observe with clarity rather than emotion, to see not only with your eyes but with the whole of your being. If strength whispers to your heart, Seven of Swords speaks directly to your awareness. This card marks the subtle, often unseen places in your life where misalignment has been hiding in plain sight. It doesn't shout. It sneaks. It moves through silence, through delayed answers, through compliments that somehow sting, through connections that feel fine on the surface but leave you tired, uneasy, or second-guessing your own instincts. What the Seven of Swords exposes is not only the presence of deception but the more difficult truth. You may have sensed it all along. Sometimes we confuse being compassionate with being blind. We excuse the little things. We rationalize the inconsistencies. We smile back at those whose energy feels wrong because we're afraid to be too much, to ask too soon, to doubt what looks acceptable. But this card is a mirror to the part of you that already knows, that already feels, and that until now may have chosen silence over confrontation. It doesn't accuse you. It simply asks, what are you pretending not to know? Life, when lived with awareness, teaches us that nothing stays buried forever. A lie, no matter how skillfully hidden, carries the weight of exposure in its core. And the deeper the betrayal, the more precise the unraveling becomes. This is the energy you're about to witness. Not a chaotic collapse, but a clean unveiling. A mask slipping when someone thinks no one is watching. A truth revealed when a detail doesn't quite line up. A tone in a conversation that cuts deeper than it should. And so, your work now is not to chase the truth, but to hold enough stillness to let it come forward. You don't need to investigate. You don't need to prove anything. Truth has a strange way of surfacing when we no longer deny it. It doesn't need confrontation. It just needs a witness. And that witness is you, calm, centered, and awake. There is a teaching that says everything hidden will eventually return to balance. Like dust rising from a rug that's shaken out in sunlight, all that has been obscured will find its way into the open. Not to punish. Not to humiliate. But to bring clarity to a space that was quietly suffocating without it. And in that moment when you see what has always been there, you'll be tempted to look away. To question your own judgment. Don't. This is not the time to minimize your perception. It is time to trust the part of you that has been whispering for far too long. The gut feeling. The tightness in your chest. The shift in your body every time you enter a certain room or speak to a certain person. Your nervous system notices what your mind tries to explain away. This card isn't about betrayal as drama. It's about awakening as a return to alignment. It's the gentle but firm reminder that your life must be built on something true, starting with how you let people into your energy. You're not being asked to fight or to fix. You're simply being asked to see. And if this message finds you at a moment of questioning, let it be the confirmation you needed. Comment below to anchor your awareness with the words, I choose clarity over comfort. I trust what I feel. Because your life expands in proportion to the truths you're willing to face. And clarity is not the end, it's the beginning. After the unveiling brought forth by the Seven of Swords, the energy shifts once again, this time, into something far more decisive. You are no longer being asked just to observe. You are being invited to choose. That's what judgment brings to the surface, not the judgment we often fear from others, but the deeper, internal reckoning that asks, are you ready to live in alignment with what you now know? There comes a moment in every transformational journey where clarity is no longer enough. Awareness without action becomes another form of avoidance. This card marks that threshold. It is the turning point between one version of your life and the next. Not because the outside world suddenly changes, but because you do. The illusion has cracked. The truth is visible. Now comes the question, will you return to the comfort of what's familiar, even if it costs you your peace? Or will you walk into the unknown where truth may feel lonelier at first, but where your soul will finally breathe? Judgment is not about punishment. It's about recognition. You are being asked to see yourself without distortion, without stories, without projection. To look honestly at your patterns, your cycles, and the ways you've participated, perhaps unconsciously, in staying small, silent, or stuck. And this is not an accusation. It's an invitation. Because every single moment of your past has brought you to this exact place. Nothing was wasted. But from this point forward, repeating old lessons becomes a choice, not a fate. In many sacred teachings, there is a principle that mirrors this, that suffering is not punishment, but resistance to seeing clearly. We suffer most not from what happens to us, but from clinging to the narratives we've created to make those events make sense. When those stories no longer serve, continuing to live inside them becomes its own form of pain. And that is where you are now, not at the end of something, but at the moment where you finally stop telling the old story and start creating a new one. This card also speaks to karmic completion, not in a mystical sense, but as a reflection of energetic repetition. Every unspoken truth, every ignored intuition, every time you silence your own needs for the sake of keeping things peaceful, those are not isolated incidents. They are threads in a larger pattern. And judgment is the moment when those threads either get tied into a new form or cut completely so something new can begin. You may be feeling the weight of this moment. The uncertainty. The fear of what will be lost if you choose differently. But what if the fear is not about loss, but about identity? What if the version of you that kept everything together is no longer needed? What if your strength now lies not in holding on, but in letting go with grace, with intention, and without apology? There is a quiet power in choosing differently, especially when the familiar path still calls your name. The courage to choose again, this time from truth rather than fear, is what sets a new cycle into motion. And as difficult as that may feel, you're not stepping into a void. You're stepping into integrity. Into a life that fits your energy rather than fractures it. So take this moment seriously, but not fearfully. You're not being pushed, you're being aligned. You're not being tested, you're being freed. And if you feel ready to step out of the old story, say so. Anchor your shift in the comments with this intention. I choose what aligns with my truth, even if it means starting over. Because the true beginning doesn't come when things fall apart. It comes the moment you decide they no longer define you. ChatGPT Detonate. After the piercing clarity of judgment, where you were invited to choose your truth over your comfort, something extraordinary begins to unfold. It doesn't come as noise or drama, but as radiance. This is the energy of the sun, and for you, Leo, it isn't just a card. It is a remembrance of who you truly are beneath all the survival patterns, all the compromises, and all the noise you've had to rise above. The sun doesn't just shine, it reveals. And in the context of this moment in your life, it reveals a version of you that is unburdened, unapologetic, and no longer in hiding. This is the energy of rebirth, not through effort, but through alignment. You've already walked through the fire. You've questioned loyalties. You've faced hard truths. And now, like dawn breaking over a long night, your path is being illuminated, not just so you can see it, but so you can feel it again. What's powerful about the sun isn't just its brightness. It's its warmth. It restores. It awakens the seeds that have been sleeping beneath the surface of your life. It tells you that all that seemed stagnant was never dead, it was simply waiting for light. And that light, Leo, is you. In times of great transition, there is often a quiet period that follows the storm, a stillness that feels both unfamiliar and sacred. The sun appears here not to rush you but to reassure you. There is nothing wrong with things getting easier. There is nothing wrong with smiling again. Joy is not a distraction from healing, it is an essential part of it. In fact, some wisdom traditions teach that joy is one of the highest forms of insight. When we allow ourselves to feel joy without guilt, we are not escaping truth, we are embodying it. That's the deeper message here. Joy is now safe for you. You don't have to shrink to be accepted. You don't have to dim your light to be included. You don't have to overextend yourself to prove you're worthy. You've paid your dues. You've done your shadow work. The universe is no longer testing you, it's trusting you. Trusting that you will no longer betray yourself to belong. That you will no longer silence your radiance for the comfort of others. That you will build a life that reflects what's been growing within you all along. In this phase, new opportunities will feel effortless, not because they lack depth, but because they no longer come with resistance. The right connections will find you not through struggle, but through resonance. The path forward will feel lighter, not because it lacks substance, but because you are no longer carrying what doesn't belong to you. You may start to notice small shifts, a clarity in your speech, a softening in your body, an increase in synchronicity. These are not coincidences. They are signs that your energy is aligning with its natural rhythm again. And when you walk in that rhythm, everything changes: your health, your relationships, your creativity, your prosperity. This is what the sun promises when you allow it in. Let your new chapter be guided by the colors that reflect this transition. Gold to honor the sovereign self that's rising. Fiery orange to awaken your creative force. Pearl white to cleanse the remnants of the past. These colors aren't just aesthetic, they carry symbolic medicine for your energy field. And pay attention to the numbers that emerge during this time. The number 10 marks the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, reminding you that it's safe to start over. The number 19 echoes the message of return back to your essence, back to your joy, back to the core light that was never truly lost. So if you feel the warmth returning, let it in. If you catch yourself smiling for no reason, trust it. And if something in you wants to hope again, please do. Because you're not hoping blindly anymore. You're hoping from truth. And hope, when rooted in clarity, becomes the blueprint for everything beautiful that follows. If this resonates with where you are, ground it now by commenting, "I allow joy to return. I am ready to rise in my light." Because sometimes healing doesn't look like more work. Sometimes it looks like finally letting the light touch what has long been hidden. As you emerge from the light of the sun where joy, clarity, and radiant selfhood have been illuminated, a quiet and sacred pause arises. It is here, in this stillness between cycles, that the Two of Wands appears. This card doesn't demand attention with intensity. Instead, it whispers with gentle insistence. It presents a subtle but deeply significant crossroads, an energetic moment where your soul must choose between what is known and what is real. The Two of Wands isn't about drama. It's not about being pulled in two directions by chaos. It's about alignment. It invites you to notice the fork in the path that always existed but that you may have walked past before, distracted by expectations, responsibilities, or the fear of letting go. Now, however, you are seeing clearly. After strength, after betrayal exposed, after the call of judgment and the clarity of the sun, this choice is no longer external. It is internal. And it is honest. One path leads back toward the familiar. You know its textures, its rhythm. It's where your old self learned to perform. It's where your boundaries bent in the name of peace. It's where you were accepted but not necessarily known. That path may be comfortable, but it no longer matches your frequency. To walk it now would mean denying how far you've come. The other path? It's open. Unwritten. It may feel lonely at first. You may not know who or what will meet you there. But this path honors the person you've become, the person who knows how to say no without guilt, who trusts their intuition over promises, who no longer tolerates the weight of relationships built on the need to hold it all together. There may be someone from the past reappearing. They might say they've changed. They may mean it. But your discernment now is sharper. You'll know, not by their words, but by your body's response. You'll feel whether their presence opens or constricts you. The body never lies. And at the same time, a new connection may begin to bloom. This person won't come wrapped in grand gestures. They will feel like peace. Their presence will quiet the room not with silence, but with steadiness. This card, like so many teachings of wisdom, asks you to be present with choice, not out of fear, but with mindfulness. There is a saying that when the mind clings to comfort, the heart becomes heavy. So instead of asking, what's safest, ask, what's lightest? Not because lightness means ease, but because it points you toward resonance. Energy doesn't lie. And truth doesn't require effort to sustain. At its core, the Two of Wands is about inner authority. It asks, are you willing to risk uncertainty for the sake of your authenticity? Are you willing to disappoint others so you can stop betraying yourself? Are you willing to be misunderstood by the world if it means being truly understood by even one person, especially when that person is you? The moment you choose from your truth, even if the outcome is unclear, you shift the vibration of everything that follows. This is the difference between living in reaction and living in alignment. The card reminds us that we do not become our highest self by choosing what is easy, we become it by choosing what is real, again and again, even when our voice shakes. So if you are standing in that space of decision, pause and listen to your own breath. Feel the weight of each option. Ask yourself, not what you should do, but what brings your heart closer to stillness. That stillness is not absence, it is presence. And from that space, you will know. If this speaks to you in this exact moment, speak it into your own reality by commenting below. I choose what brings me peace, not what keeps me trapped. Because every time you choose what's real, you choose yourself, and that is the beginning of true freedom. So now, dear Leo, we arrive at the edge of something new. You've listened, reflected, maybe even felt the stirrings of a deeper truth resonating through each card. And as the final words of this message settle, I want to remind you, nothing in this reading was random. Not the timing, not the symbols, not even your presence here. You were meant to receive this because your soul is already moving, already shifting toward a more honest, more empowered version of who you are meant to become. This isn't just about what was revealed through the Strength card or what the Two of Wands has invited you to decide. It's about everything in between. The moments you realized you'd been carrying more than your share. The flickers of intuition that told you something was off. The clarity that finally arrived when you chose truth over illusion. And the courage that is now rising, slowly but surely, to help you walk through that door you once felt unworthy to even knock on. So here is the gentle but urgent invitation. Don't let this be just another message you hear and forget. Let it be the spark that moves you. What action, small or bold, can you take today to shift toward the life that actually reflects your inner light? What are you being called to release, not out of anger, but out of deep respect for your own energy? And if your next step isn't clear just yet, that's okay too. Sometimes the most radical thing we can do is simply be still and choose not to go back to what we've outgrown. You are no longer who you were. And you're not yet who you're becoming. You are standing in the sacred in-between, the space where transformation takes root. The choices you make from here, what you say yes to, what you walk away from, who you choose to become loyal to, these are not just preferences. They are alignments. They are energetic contracts with your future self. Make them with intention. Make them with care. And if something in today's reading opens something inside you, even just a little, I invite you to write it into reality. Speak it into being. Share your truth in the comments below with the words, "I am ready to live my truth and lead my life with clarity and light." Because when you write those words, you're not just typing into a screen, you're sending out a frequency that says, "I'm awake now. I remember who I am." Thank you, from the depth of my heart, for being here. Every like, every comment, every subscription brings you deeper into the soul family of eternal mindfulness. Your presence supports this work, fuels this mission, and allows us to continue bringing you messages that are designed not to impress, but to awaken. And trust me, Leo, if you've come this far, you're already on your way. If this message stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you love, someone who's been walking through the dark and needs a lantern. You never know how far the light you carry will travel. You don't need permission to shine. You were born for it. And maybe, just maybe, today was the moment you finally believed that too. Stay bright. Stay open. And I'll meet you in the next message.